Hello, everybody. Welcome back. A brand new episode. Her business, her voice, her conversation. Well, today, I'm going to have a conversation with a psychotherapist. She is a Reiki Master. Oh, I'm really interested in all of this. Podcaster and author. Here, Lucy Forsting. And I've been looking forward to this conversation for some time. A delightful lady. And when you hear her story, how she's been giving to mankind, you're going to understand why I'm excited to spend this time with her. So thank you, Lucy. Thank you so much for being here with us.
Oh, you're very, very welcome. I'm thrilled to be here.
Gosh, well, you are a healer mentally.
Correct.
And physically, and not a novice, I may say. You've been doing this for some time. So take us back to how you opened up practice. Well, actually, you started out, you're from the Midwest, and kind of like that rural type of upbringing and that type of thing. So take us back to how you decided that you're going to fix animals and fix people, and how you came into not one practice, but two practices. And this has become a lifelong work. So take us on your journey, Lucy.
Oh, it's a convoluted journey at best. So when I was probably about 4 or 5 years old, we moved out into the country in a little town in the middle of Indiana. And we were on 5 acres, and I used to just ride my bike all over the place. But we at one time had 22 cats and 9 German Shepherds. And there were no leash laws or anything else back then. It was just, if you were out in the country, they could come and go as they pleased. So the cats obviously got hold of a lot of different animals, bunnies, birds, whatever. And my dad built some little cages so that I could help nurse them back to health. And a lot of times it was just my holding them that seemed to do the trick. But I was too young to understand anything about energy. And now I understand about vibrational frequencies. And I think you and I spoke about the fact that we have 50 trillion cells in our body that all vibrate. And so when you are literally in alignment, then they vibrate at the same frequency. So remember that, and I'll come back to it in a minute. The other thing I want listeners to remember is that we have 40,000, so 40,000 brain cells that are in our heart. And most people don't realize that. And so when we come from our intuition, that is where we're coming from. When we talk about the fact that you just know something, and you don't know how you know it, but you know it.
Yes.
Okay, so that is your heart, your intuition, giving you the correct answer. And when we jump to our intellect, then we don't make our decisions very wisely. We typically base it on, what does the news say? What does this pundit say? Where did they get their information? And so we're trying to intellectualize our understanding of life, as opposed to really coming from a gut that is the right place for us to come from. And everybody's different, okay? And that's what my book does begin to teach, is that you have to trust your heart. You have to know that the reason every single one of us is alive is all about love, and understanding that that's the only reason we're here, is to understand love and to give love.
Understand love and give love. That's it in a nutshell.
In a nutshell, that is absolutely it. And when we let other things get in the way, which we all do, including me, but when we let other things get in the way, we forget that. We forget that that's why we're here. And so then we get caught up in dramas, all kinds of dramas. And certainly with the pandemic of all of 2020 and still going in 2021, we are caught up in politics and in profit-making situations, because no one probably will ever convince me that the pharmaceutical companies are not coming into this mostly with the profit margin in mind. They wanted to save lives, but there were other ways they could have done it, and they didn't go that direction. They went the method that was going to give them the most bang for their buck. So going back to when I was a little girl, so as I continued to grow up, I thought I wanted to become a nurse, back in the, late 60s, 70s. That was kind of what everybody did is you graduated from high school, and I was only 17, excuse me, when I graduated. So I was young, and I went off to college, and I thought, well, I'll become a nurse. I was dating a pre-med student at the time. And so I thought, well, this will be kind of cool. Well, doctor and nurse. Okay. Well, that went by the way, and I continued into a 5-year program. So I was at a hospital doing nurses training by the time I was, late 18, 19 years old. And I knew immediately, that gut feeling that was not where I belonged. I was referred to as the Mary Sunshine of the wards. And because I always wanted to just cheer people up and have them think about how they could maybe come through whatever situation that they were in, but how they could come through this. So I went back and I went through college then in 3 years, because I lost a whole year because all I got was organic chemistry out of my year in nursing, and went back and finished out my undergraduate with my class, and then later went on to graduate school. And I realized that psychology is where I wanted to be, because the mind is what controls the body. What we do with our thoughts is obviously what controls our outcome. And again, the book teaches that, that our mind creates our reality. And if children learn that at a very early age, they can deal with bullying. They can deal with not doing well in school academically. They can deal with, a friend that disappoints them, or, anything, because they have to begin to understand, I can either buy into this and believe what they're telling me, or I can go inside, find the truth, and believe that. So, as I continued to go through my life, I later founded in Green Bay, Wisconsin. It was a Synergy Counseling Services, and we had 3 satellite clinics that serviced United Health in Northeast Wisconsin. So it was a full medical clinic. It was psychiatric, psychological, and counseling.
Wow.
And then eventually I came here to Florida. And one of the things that I guess is really important for everyone to understand as far as energy work, and you said I was a Reiki Master. And I took my training in a method called Usui method, which is out of Japan. But I will tell you that what I do is a God-given ability as opposed to a training. I came into it through traditional training, but I later studied with a quantum physicist who taught me all about how to send energy. And when my husband, who has been deceased now 3.5 years, but 3.5 years prior to that, so 7 years ago, he was in ICU with what's called pericardial effusion. And that means that you have fluid around your heart that's crushing your heart. And had he not been an athlete, he would have died, but he had a bigger heart than most. So he was fighting it off. But by the time I got to ICU, because they had admitted him the night before around midnight, so they called me at 8:30 in the morning and basically said, hey, we've got him in ICU and you need to be here now. So I got there and they pulled me aside and they said, he has an hour and a half to live. And his legs had already started modeling. So his circulation was gone and his oxygen level was only 78%. So what happened was they left me. And I say this knowing that a lot of people will understand and a lot of people won't, but I have always had angelic guides with me since I was probably 17. And they don't talk to me all the time, but a lot of the times they do, or they show me things. And in this particular case, they made it very clear I was to put my right hand on the top of his head and my left hand on his heart. And I did that and I got very quiet, and I didn't understand what I was doing so much because there was a human part of me that went, well, what is this gonna, what good is this gonna do? But I follow directions pretty well. And so I basically followed those directions. It took 30 seconds to go from 78% oxygen to 98%. The doctors ran down the hall. They said, this is impossible, but keep doing what you're doing because we can take him to surgery. So he lived another 3.5 years.
Oh my.
So it was just quite amazing. And we all have that ability. And that's the point I want to make, is that every single person that's alive has this ability to heal, not only themselves, but to heal others. But we don't believe it. You know, we think, oh no, you have to be an MD, or you have to be this or that or the other thing. We, you know, Christ said, I think in Matthew, that what he did, we can do also and more.
Yes.
And that is what that means, is that we have those abilities, but we have to begin to believe in ourselves, and we have to begin to understand how powerful we truly are.
And obey as the angelic guides direct us.
Yes.
We have to follow through.
Yes, we do.
What does it matter?
Exactly.
Oh,
exactly.
My goodness. You made mention, Lucy, a couple times to your book. Let's get over here and talk about Miss Twig.
Miss Twig.
The Adventures of Miss Twiggs and Company. A children's book, but it's set up for us to well, go ahead, set it up.
Okay. It's really not a children's book. Did you ever read The Velveteen Rabbit?
Long time ago.
Okay. There are children's books that are not actually children's books. They have much deeper meanings.
Okay.
So it's not like a picture book or a fairy tale, in the sense that this has deep spiritual meanings for people to understand. So I have had CPAs read it, you know, and they're very analytical, right? They actually took notes. They called me afterwards and said, I took notes because I realized that these were messages that I needed now as an adult. And, you know, I never got them as a child. So The Adventures of Miss Twiggs and Company, the title of it actually came, my parents used to live in Santa Monica, California. And so I would go visit them on a, you know, at least twice a year basis. And there was a little store, it might still be there, but I don't know, called Twiggs, Twiggs. And it was on Montana, and it was in Santa Monica. So it was close to Ocean Boulevard. And my parents just lived off of Ocean Boulevard. So right before Christmas one year, I went into this beautiful little store where everything was all kind of handcrafted. But my husband and I were out there to do a cruise. And so we had spent a lot of money, and I wasn't, you know, I saw this mouse, and I knew I was writing this book even back then, but I didn't have all of the particulars down. But I saw her and I thought, oh my gosh, she is so fantastic. But the price tag was kind of fantastic too, because she was handmade. And so the owner said, why don't you come back the day after Christmas? Because everything in the store that's still here will be half off. And I thought, okay, I will do that. Well, I kind of forgot because, you know, Christmas was busy and the next day was busy. And then all of a sudden around 3:30 in the afternoon, I was like, oh my gosh. So off we went. Well, his shelves were bare and I didn't see her anywhere. However, it's another one of these gifts that I know I have, but I believe everyone has. And I knew she was still in the store. And so I kind of looked around and I could feel her energy, if you will, above my head. And so I looked at the owner and I said, what is above my head? And he said, well, that's, you know, inventory, and it's where we do this, that, and the other thing. I said, she's up there. I said, I don't know how she got there, but she's up there. So he walked up the stairs. He came down with her 5 minutes later, and he said, I have no idea how she got there. And so he sold her to me for 50% off. And I told him as I left, I said, I now have the title for my book. And he said, I didn't know you were writing a book. And I said, no, she's one of the main characters. That's why I loved her. It's called The Adventures of Miss Twiggs and Company for your store.
I bet his mouth just fell open, didn't it?
Kind of, as I recall, he was like, wow. He said, well, thank you. But I made, instead of TWIGS, I made it TWIGGS. And then I began to, work on it. There was a man at the time who is now deceased, who was a channeler. And so he and I were friends. And I asked him at some point when I was getting ready to start sending the, you have query letters when you write, and you have, so many chapters you're supposed to send. And so I contacted him and I said, is this a good time for my book to come out? And he told me no. He
Wow.
said, it's not the right time. You will know when the right time is. And I was just beginning my career in earnest, as a therapist. And so I literally packed everything up because I knew he was connected.
Mhm.
And I packed everything up and put it away. And I thought, when the time is right, I will pull it back out. 20 years later, the time was right. And so it was about the same time my husband had been diagnosed with breast cancer. And it was one of the drugs that gave him the pericardial effusion.
Mhm.
But he was diagnosed in 2006. So it was around 2012. And a friend challenged me to finish the book.
Mhm.
And, since my husband was, quite ill at that point, I thought, okay, I'm home a lot and I will work on that, because then my focus was on something that was constructive and creative.
Yes.
And so that's what I did. And then it came out as an ebook. And so it got a fair amount of attention, and people were saying, please write it as a publication so that I can hold it, so that I can read it to my child. So that's an expensive proposition if no one has actually written a book.
Yeah.
A part of it was my, the characters were illustrated by the assistant art director at Universal Studios in Orlando.
They're beautiful.
And
Beautiful
I met him.
illustrations.
Right. He captured what I was trying to do. It took us a while of working together because they looked too cartoonish, like Universal.
Mm-hmm.
And he finally, I kept sending him pictures of what I wanted. And it's like the light bulb went on, and then he created exactly what I wanted. So, that was probably one of the biggest expenses, was hiring him as an illustrator. But I think it was so worth it. I've had children who've come up to me now and that have read it, and, they just, in fact, one little girl, I asked her, I said, what was it that you loved about the story? And I thought she would say, oh, one of the characters, like I love Miss Twiggs, or I love Penelope or Mortimer. And instead she said, because the book was about love and joy. So she got it, and she was 9 years old and she got it. So I think when I was doing some of the background, and I'll give you another funny little story, because I do channel information. I don't know how I do it. I just do it. So after I'd written the book and I was creating the website, I wanted to give people information about Weardale, England, which is where the mice are born. They're born in St. John's Church.
Mm-hmm.
Turns out, no big surprise that there was a St. John's Church in Weardale. So that was kind of cool. And I had pictures. In fact, if you go to the website, www.misstwiggs.com, you'll see pictures of all of the things that are actually in Weardale. Yes. And they carry little tiny crystals with them to leave for, to help the person remember the lesson that they learned. Mm-hmm. And so there was a character in the book called Mr. Wagner, whose wife had died during World War II. And so they leave him a blue crystal. Yes. They leave Brian a little yellow crystal. Now the blue crystal is your throat chakra. Mm-hmm. And the yellow crystal is for your solar plexus. That's that chakra color. And so there is a mine. It's the largest fluorite mine in the world that's in Weardale, England. I did not know that until I began putting the website together. Wow. But more importantly, and this one blew me away. If you look at the website, it has a picture of the mice underneath the church pew. Uh-huh. And on the church pew is the carving of a mouse. And the man who created every single pew in that church where they were born carved a mouse on every pew. And he called himself the Mouse Man. and he
my.
made furniture back in the late 1800s. So I'm beginning to believe that I might have even lived in Weardale, England, and knew all of this as I was writing the book, because how would I know about the fluorite mine? How would I know about a mouse on a church pew?
Yes. I mean, the
I
carvings, they're so exact.
Yeah,
It's not like, I think that might be a mouse. No, that's a mouse.
that is a
How
mouse.
would you know that? In the 18th century? I mean, it's like unreal. So now this is real exciting stuff. And people have to go to your website, because I mean, you show us the countryside, you show us all of the lay of the land, and the cover of the book is just gorgeous. It was well worth the investment. But I want people to really understand that The Adventures of Miss Twiggs and Company is really a book about creating your own personal reality. These three mice go on a dangerous trek at one point to leave England. Isn't this during World War II?
Well, it's at the preface is at the end of World War II.
Okay.
And so they get into a boxcar and they ride out into the area surrounding Weardale. And it turns out, and this is another thing I didn't know until I was doing the background, it turns out that there were, they called them detention camps. They weren't concentration, but anybody who was living in England during the war, if they had German heritage or Italian heritage or something, they would gather them up, much like we did the Japanese, and put them in these detention camps. But they didn't let families stay together. So the men and boys all went to one, and the women and girls all went to another. So when they are in this area, it's hamsterly forest that they kind of wander through, and they hear a little boy crying. And the little boy is next to the fence, and he's not doing manual labor because he's young. And so they ask him why he's crying, and he explains he doesn't know where his mother and sisters are. And so they help him begin to understand that if you focus on your memories that are happy memories, it'll get you through the tough times. And so he promises at the end of their time together, they visit him several times, but he promises that he will take that message with him, because now the war is over and they're releasing everybody, and he will be able to be reunited, with his family, but he's never going to forget that message. And then the book actually starts with another adventure. And so they, at this point, go back to Mount Pleasant, which is where they had been on a prior visit. That's when they met Mr. Wagner, and they don't ever know where life is going to drop them. So they're in a crate in a boxcar traveling, and it just so happens that this particular crate is lifted out onto the ground. And so here we go. And they don't know they're in Mount Pleasant right away, but they find out that they are after they meet Brian. And Brian saves them from Derby, who is Mr. Wagner's Office Depot cat. And the cat spots these little things moving around, and I'm sure he's thinking lunchtime. And of course, Brian sees it too and rescues them. And so the journey then begins between Brian and the trio. And that's what I refer to them as, is Miss Twiggs is kind of like the wisdom behind everything. Mortimer is all heart, he comes always from his heart place. And Penelope's a little shy, but she offers, just this gentle touch to everything, so that the three of them make up ideally what we might want to become as people.
And this is what you've given people while you're in your practice down through the years, I would imagine.
Yes.
The wisdom, the soft touch, and a bit of shyness, a bit of soft touch, but strong-hearted guidance. I would imagine that's how you led people. It goes over also to your podcast, and your podcast is also about life, making our lives better. So you do such a thing with your book, and now you're here with your podcast also, Synergy Connection Show. And I just early on, your show was covering relationships. Oh my God, don't we all need to take a look at relationships? I love this. The difference between CBD and marijuana. I thought, boy, oh boy, I never thought about,
Mhm.
the two being different. Change. Aren't we all here with this thing of change? It impacts us all on different levels. And then I loved also you undertook understanding our social justice system. These are episodes at the top of the fold that you're tackling.
Right.
So it's a very right now in this hour that we all need this information type of a podcast, and you do give us the tools, and there's a lot of energy, positive energy that comes from your episodes, the ones that I've listened to. So you want to speak to Synergy Connection show? We only have a few minutes left, but I want people to understand that you are on Spotify, you're on all of the major platforms, and they really need to take a listen to what you have going on over there.
Well, I guess about almost 3 years ago now, there was a local radio station that was live. And I used to do a live show in Green Bay, Wisconsin. And it was an hour long, and people could call in and they could ask whatever kind of questions they wanted to ask of a therapist.
Mhm.
So there is a national, much like LinkedIn, it's called Alignable. That's a business affiliation. And so he was part of that organization. And he reached out to me about 3 years ago and said, I'd love to meet you. I think you'd be great on my radio show. And so we met, and 2 hours later, he said, I'd like to offer you a show. I don't want to charge anything. I just want you to do the show for me. So I did do it for, oh gosh, almost, I guess, coming up on 2 years. And he became very ill.
Mhm.
And so he had to give up the show because it was taking too much from him energetically. And I don't honestly know how he is today, but it was a national and international kind of a show. And so at the same time that that was beginning, I could see, that he was beginning to have health challenges. Um, Podcasts were becoming more and more relevant. And of course, some of them I think are obviously much better than others. And
Yeah.
some offered only, a one-sided, like health and nutrition maybe, or exercise, or it might be strictly psychological, or it might be strictly, business related, because there's
Mhm.
thousands of podcasts out there. But what I wanted to do is I began to see that in order to live our best life, we literally needed to understand how complex we are as human beings. And so we have a physical, an emotional, a spiritual, and an intellectual,
Mhm.
point of view. So we have all four that we work with.
Mhm.
And what I explain to people is, if you're only feeding the intellectual, let's just say that you are a medical doctor, an attorney, a judge, I've worked with all of them. If you're only that, and you're working to be successful, you might be allowing the spiritual and the emotional side of your life to kind of go by the side.
Oh,
You're
yes.
keeping the physical and the intellectual going because you need those two. But
Yes.
now you've got a two-legged stool. It doesn't work. And so those people would come into me and they would say, I make a lot of money. I should be happy. I'm not, my relationship isn't working at home. My children and I don't know how to communicate. It would be something like that. And it's because we are all four. So, and people that are only spiritual, and you've known those individuals,
Oh, yeah.
those people, if they don't watch the physical side, they gain too much weight, they're always in their spiritual place. And so now they're physically not able to do what they could maybe do more of spiritually.
Yes.
So it's a
Yes.
balancing job. And so on this show, I really and truly focus on the balance. If you don't have your health, and we talked a little bit about the pandemic, but if you don't have your health, you don't have anything.
You're
The,
right,
the
Lucy.
rest of it is not going to work. So
Mhm.
you got to do the foundation with health, and then look at the other three areas and go back to learning, discover things in life. Just because you're 65 or over doesn't mean you can't learn something. So there's all kinds of ways to learn on the internet, and, open up your eyes and your ears
Mhm.
and learn something that's exciting, and then share it with your partner. Hey, I heard this today, or I'd love for you to listen to this and let's talk about it. If it's emotional, communication is at the foundation there. Go within your heart, and learn how to communicate differently. God gave us 2 ears, so we would hear twice as much as we speak. And what do most people do? They yak. They yak at each other and they don't listen. And I watch people with their cell phones out for dinner, well,
Yes.
before the pandemic, and here they are sitting across from each other, and they don't even have eye contact. They have eye contact on their phone.
Yeah.
How sad is that? And then on the spiritual level, I said, it doesn't have to be organized religion, because some people are, Buddhists, they're, part of Confucianism. There's all different kinds of beliefs out there, but find something that you resonate with, that's bigger than you are.
Yes.
Even if it's hugging a tree, go hug a tree, go sit on the ground and learn how to, get your root chakra back into the earth so that you're grounded. And then you can work on communicating with everything above you.
You're all about alignment. This thing, we have to be aligned at the end of the day. If we aren't, everything else is off. That's what I hear you say.
It is. And I just refer to people as, like they either have a 3-legged stool that's really maybe in balance pretty good, or maybe not. And how many times have you been at a restaurant where your table isn't quite level?
Yeah.
And they'll come along and they'll put, like a package of sugar underneath it.
Yeah.
To balance it out. And I said, our lives are like that. Wobbly tables and wobbly chairs are not much fun to sit in or sit by, if we're trying to eat. And so our lives are like that. We really need to focus on keeping that balance so that we're always sharing with grandchildren and friends who we really are. I mean, we're so unique and so complex, and we can have such beautiful lives, but it's a matter of getting in touch with it, and not letting our jobs become everything, or, our best friend become everything. I mean, it's just keeping that balance.
Listen to those brain cells in our heart, those brain cells in our heart. Listen to our gut.
Yeah.
It's not going to let us down.
Right. And if they want to find the radio show, if they just go to, maybe you can post it, but if you go to www.synergy, SYNERGY connection, CONNECTION, radio, RADIO.com. That is the actual website. And there's, I think, 15 pages now of shows, over 150 or so shows there that go all the way back to the very beginning. There's a synopsis on every show. So you can read about the person that's talking, and, you can listen to the show there. Okay. Or there is another platform, that is just through the podcast. And I'll send that to you later, because then they can choose whether they want to use, Spotify or iHeartRadio or Google or Apple. They can choose which one they maybe listen to. And those shows, there's probably about 40 of them there now, because we didn't start until last September to do the podcast. But all the other shows are on synergyconnectionradio.com.
Okay. I'll make sure that everything's in the show notes, because it really is a phenomenal show and it opens up one's mind. I hear you say that we must remain lifelong learners. We can't stop that. That's what aids to our living our best life. Yes. Don't you think?
Absolutely. And the thing that's really quite fascinating to me is other cultures. The Japanese, the Chinese revere their elders. The Native Americans, they revere their elders. Here in America, unfortunately, we don't look at somebody the same way, and yet they have such wisdom and knowledge of what used to be. I'm sure they don't understand maybe computers if they're in their 80s, the way you and I do. But at the same time, look at what they do understand, then we don't have a clue about because we didn't live then. And
Yes.
so it really is a matter of respect, acknowledging, that years, do equal wisdom, and that we can all learn from each other. I just absolutely, it really was tragic for me because my husband, the last year of his life had to be in a nursing home. I could no longer care for him. So I had worked with enough friends that, everybody took a day, and I was there 4 days
Mhm.
a week, sometimes 5, but I had to have a little bit of flexibility. So I always talked to him on the phone, always talked to the nurses, but we had people around him
Mhm.
constantly. So many never had a visitor, or it was so seldom. And it was just tragic, so tragic.
Mm. See, you bring so many vital conversations to mind. And coming out of the pandemic, we have there's so many things that we could talk about. This has been a wonderful time with you. I tell you that I'm definitely going to get my copy of The Adventures of Miss Twiggs and Company. I definitely am, because I I know that when we spoke earlier, you said it's not a children's book, but
Mhm.
the illustrations just draw you in. And then we go to the website and how you intricately describe each and every mouse, and you show us this slice of history and the geography. It just draws you in. So I want to thank you for channeling, creating that work for all of us, so that we, at the end of the day, we can live our better lives and create our own personal realities. I appreciate that greatly. And as a sister podcaster, I definitely enjoy your shows. Thank you. You take on some courageous conversations, but they're necessary. And I appreciate you. So I thank you so very much for sharing this time with me. Okay, Lucy?
My pleasure. And you're going to be on my show in the not too distant future.
I can't wait. There's a synergy and an energy, and I'm just going to ask you this one final question. One
Sure,
final question.
sure.
Speaking of energy and synergy, do
Mhm.
you think that it's harder to find it between people these days because we are back to speeding up our lives? Or is it just something that kind of falls in people's laps? What are your thoughts on that?
Wow. Um, I think that if the individual is open to synergistic communication with the universe, then the universe brings people into your life, much like you and I got brought into one another's lives. And that is the energetic force, the law of attraction, if you will, that pulls people together. I think when you tend to be closed off because of fear-based emotions, anxiety, depression. By the way, I still do counseling
Okay.
for individuals that are having those kinds of issues. But when you are caught up in your personal drama or the drama of someone else that you're close to,
Mm.
then it's very difficult to have those synergistic moments because it's a barrier.
Mm.
I don't know whether, are you familiar with Dr. Emoto and his
No,
work?
not
Well,
at all.
Dr. Emoto's deceased now, but it might be something for your listeners and you to look up. It's E as in Edward, M as in Mary, O as in Oscar, T as in Tom, O as in Oscar. And he did a lot of research on snowflakes and ice, and how you can talk to water, when it is being frozen. And if you
Mhm.
talk to it in a negative way, then the configurations under a microscope look like cancer.
Oh my goodness.
And when you talk to it in a positive way and send loving thoughts to it, this is all about how energy works, then it's the most beautiful, magical creations that you'd ever want to see. And he's done several books, but you can go online and look at his designs, that he found. I will tell you one other thing as a closing for your listeners, but a friend of mine was talking about how when she was in graduate school and she was studying more the neurology of the brain and how that worked, they did some experiments on plants. So they had about 12 plants, and they had a number of students that would do the same thing as Dr. Emoto. They would come through and they would tell the plants, you know, you're beautiful, you're growing beautifully, I love you. I mean, whatever they wanted to send, they would do that. And they did this for quite a while, and they had these little electroencephalogram kind of things attached to the plants so that they could read how the plants were responding. And so you could see this little bleeping, you know, motion when they were being spoken to. And when there was negative, you know, that was very suppressed. And when it was a positive emotion, it would, you know, like resonate at a higher level. Well, then they asked one of the students to destroy one of the plants. And so, you know, it happened, you know, without a lot of fanfare. He just knew what he was supposed to do. But everybody was there, and all of a sudden he started hacking away at this plant. All the other plants knew that something was happening to one of their own, and they got very distressed. And then here's the best part about it, because animals and plants and people remember.
Mhm.
And so several weeks later, that same person walked in, and all the plants knew he was there. And they were totally distressed because they didn't know whether another one of them was going to be hurt.
Oh my.
So if we understand that, then what we do to our plants around us, what we do to Mother Earth, what we do to our animals that we love, what we do to animals that we don't even love, you know, spiders and cockroaches and whatnot, but they all have vibrational frequencies. They all know. And there are so many ways that we can learn to take care of not only each other as humans, but, you know, our earth and everything that's in it.
What a way to end this conversation. And it gets back to how you opened up. We love. You have to, it's all about loving the planet, loving each other, loving yourself.
Right. It's all about love is all there is. And if we get down to that basic understanding, then would we live our lives differently? I think so.
Yeah. This has been an eye-opening conversation. It went a lot deeper than I thought. I knew that we would tread deep, but this was, and oh my goodness, makes a lot of sense. And it's reality. So,
It is.
Oh my goodness. Psychotherapist, Reiki Master, podcaster, author of The Adventures of Miss Twiggs and Company, Lucy Forsting. I thank you so much for your time. I'm going to make sure that I have all of the information, contact information that you gave us. I'll make sure that it's in the show notes, so everybody get a copy of this fab book, and leave a review. I myself would like to double back and read some of the reviews. So when you get your copy, be sure to leave a review, because it's going to be quite eye-opening. So, and I'll have mine there. You'll be able to read my review also. So I'm not telling you all to do something that I'm not going to do, but
thanks, Margot.
Oh, no worries, no worries. This was wonderful, wonderful conversation. That's it for another conversation here. Her business, her voice, her conversation. It's always so hard for me to close out. 30 minutes goes by so fast, but thank you for staying, and be sure to buy a copy of Miss Twiggs, The Adventures. I'm sure that you're going to find deep meaning, and it will probably help you with rearrange your life. All right. So I'll be back next week, brand new episode here. Her business, her voice, her conversation. Stay safe now.